All the way back in 2016, there was some buzz about Michael Keaton playing Ray Kroc in a biopic about the man who founded McDonald's, with some even saying he would get an Academy Award nomination for his performance. And yet, once the movie came out, it was as if everything deflated, with barely even a word being spoken about it since. And today I'd like to discuss why I believe that to be the case, as well as going into a few specific issues that I personally have with this movie. And obviously there will be spoilers ahead, so if for any reason you're planning on watching this movie, I would highly recommend you click away now. Okay, so to get right into it, I believe this movie's failure comes down to one general point. It's a bad biopic. And I don't mean in terms of structure or storytelling. I mean in the sense that it hates the man that it's supposed to be about. Because I can tell you right off the bat, the man presented in this movie is not Ray Kroc. The man Michael Keaton is playing is not Ray Kroc. Now, I can't claim to have known the man personally, but I've done my fair share of research both before and after this movie came out, and I can safely tell you the man in this movie and the man that actually existed don't have much in common. This movie goes so far out of its way to vilify Kroc and make him out to be this conniving, immoral man obsessed with success and will step on anybody to get it. Now, like I just said, I never knew the man personally. I'm way too young for that. But nothing I have ever read about him has ever painted such a portrait of him. And to better illustrate my point, let's first go over the things this movie actually gets right. Okay, so Kroc really was 52 years old and a milkshake salesman when he discovered the McDonald's brothers restaurant. He really did have several failed businesses under his belt. The McDonald's brothers really had perfected a fast food system that heavily intrigued Kroc. He was also married at the time. He was also able to persuade them into letting him try and franchise it, but only after he bought it out from another man who was also trying to franchise it, and one of the brothers did have much more faith in him than the other, and they did agree, but only if he followed their strict set of rules. And as shown in the movie, these rules quickly caused problems for Kroc, both in terms of money and practicality. His chain restaurants were also failing until he came across an excellent financial advisor who finally put him on the track to making the business successful. Kroc really did divorce his wife and go on to marry another woman. And finally, the McDonald's brothers really did agree to leave the business entirely for $2.7 million. But believe me, that's where any and all similarities end. Okay, so what the movie only briefly shows is that the rules and regulations set by the McDonald's brothers were almost impossible to follow and make the business successful on a wide scale. And Kroc never blatantly disobeyed these requirements either. He begged and pleaded with them to let him make changes, but they refused, and he had to make do with what they said. He didn't break a single rule they had while they were business partners. Like that milkshake argument over the phone, for instance, never happened. Then, with the mounting pressure from other chains copying McDonald's, in 1961 they finally let Kroc buy them out. The actual problems and eventual split between the brothers and Kroc was much more of a two-way street than the movie would have you believe. Because, frankly, what ended up happening in real life was inevitable. The McDonald's brothers were not very ambitious people who just stumbled onto a gold mine, and Kroc, an experienced businessman, saw that potential and decided to run with it. Basically, the McDonald's brothers cared about a particular set of systems before anything else, while Kroc wanted to franchise all over the country, where different stores had different needs. And again, while this is depicted in the movie, it makes it look like Kroc and the McDonald's brothers fell out because he was a jerk and they were the innocent victims of his schemes, instead of because he wanted to see the business live up to its full potential while the brothers wanted a smaller franchise. Now you can argue over which one was right all day long, but at the end of the day, a partnership between people with very different mindsets like that was never going to work out. So like I said, that outcome was inevitable. What the movie also doesn't show was that Kroc was suffering from alcoholism at the time he discovered McDonald's. In fact, towards the end of his life, he was even in an alcohol rehabilitation clinic. Now, you'd think that would most certainly be in the movie, but it's not even brought up once. And I'll freely admit that I don't know much when it comes to his love life, but his divorce had a lot more to do with his alcoholism and them disagreeing over certain decisions with McDonald's than him lusting after another man's wife. Now, again, I'm not going to say that had nothing to do with it, but the divorce was still quite a mutual one. Because what it also doesn't show is he had also had a daughter with that wife and apparently was still relatively close with her at the time of her death in 1973. Also, he only briefly met the woman he's shown lusting after in the movie in 1957 and didn't see her again until 1969. During the in-between time, he had divorced his first wife and married again. So she definitely didn't play the role the movie tries to imply she does in that divorce. And then there's the handshake deal. To put it bluntly, that didn't happen. The two parties had come to the mutual deal of $2.7 million, and they never asked for a share of the company. It's pretty much accepted that a relative of the McDonald brothers found out how rich they could be from owning even half a stock in it and simply made up the handshake deal story in the hopes of getting it. So the fact that they put that in the movie and treat it as complete 100% fact absolutely baffles me. I mean, no, Kroc and the McDonald's brothers didn't have the best relationship, but it's nothing like you see in the movie. Once the deal was set, they only fought one other time, and that was because the brothers had given away the property of the original McDonald's location rather than sell it to Kroc, and that was it. And while one brother did say he never forgave Kroc, that was mainly because things didn't go the way he'd expected them to, and still admitted he was very happy with the $1 million he'd gotten. And the other one said in an interview years after Kroc had died that he had no regrets about what happened, and the only thing that annoyed him was that Kroc had called himself the founder of McDonald's, and he had named a different location the first McDonald's. Okay, so you're probably wondering, what was my point with me saying all of that? Basically, that the real-life Ray Kroc was most often described as simply a businessman who let his pride and ego inflate a bit after McDonald's actually proved successful. However, the movie version of Ray Kroc is depicted as a man who can barely hold back his ambition, using people as stepping stones to get up to the top, while using every legal loophole he can to screw over his partners before ultimately cheating them out of billions of dollars. And, as I just went over, nothing like that happened in real life. It was like the writers did everything they could to make Kroc come across as a ruthless, almost monstrous man, while removing anything from the real-life person that could have humanized him or made him sympathetic in any way to the audience. To put it simply, the movie is nothing short of a character assassination of the real-life Kroc. Now, like I said before, I'm not trying to say that he was a perfect man without flaws or that he was a saint or anything like that. Far from it. I'm just saying that they took a man that even one of the McDonald's brothers said he had no regrets dealing with and turned him into a borderline sociopath with absolutely no redeeming qualities. And that is what I believe led to the film quickly falling into obscurity. Nobody wants to watch a movie where a heartless businessman steps all over two ordinary people's passion project and not only get away with it, but cheats them out of their share of the money. Because you already get that too often in the real world. And especially since that's so far removed from what happened in real life, which would also alienate anybody looking for a more accurate story and leave them wondering why they had changed it so much. But what really baffles me is they brought all of that on themselves. They didn't have to go the route they did at all. They could have, and probably should have, done a much more accurate depiction of what happened, because that's really a very interesting story. And I honestly believe that the general audience would have found that much more compelling. but instead they told a completely fictional version of the rise of McDonald's. And ironically enough, it was that very character assassination of Kroc that caused it to not live up to its full potential. Now, I don't know what the writers of this movie had against Ray Kroc, but it's obvious to me that somebody involved in the production had it out for him. And in the process, they made a biopic that's a biopic in name only, because honestly, if you just change the names of the characters in Restaurant, the movie would be barely recognizable from the founding of McDonald's after the first half hour, and would have probably been a much better movie had it been an original story. And if you ask me, a biopic should be a character study of the person you're making the movie about to show them at their best and worst and ultimately show what that person was all about. And some of the best biopics of all time came from copying that basic formula. But in this case, they obviously wanted to put Kroc in the worst light possible. And if you ask me, the movie suffered as a whole for it. Okay, that pretty much wraps up what I wanted to say. But now you tell me, what do you think? Do you think The Founder is a good movie and biopic? Or do you think it's an unwarranted character assassination? Please feel free to let me know in the comments. And remember, if you disagree with everything I said, that's fine. I just think the movie was being unfair with its depiction of Kroc, and you are free to disagree with that. So once again, thank you all for watching. It's very greatly appreciated, and I hope to see you all next time.